Hi, this is Mark Arnold from Fun Ideas Podcast, and today we have a special guest who has written a book called Everyone is Tulip, and it's a graphic novel. And here he is, Dave Baker. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Mark. I
Hey.
really appreciate you taking the time to talk about some funny papers.
So, this book, you gave me a sample copy so I can read through it. It was very interesting. It basically describes, if I can paraphrase, a girl's adventures with her cell phone, basically. And she's also trying to be an aspiring actress. And she has kind of this alter ego life, if I can say it and you kind of don't know what's going to happen next. So it's kind of a lengthy adventure, about 200 pages, I believe, and very well drawn by Nicole Gu, who is supposed to join us today, but that's okay. So I'll just ask Dave all the Nicole questions as well,
That's fine. I'll do my best Nicole impersonation. It'll be wonderful.
and maybe we'll have her on again in a future time if you do a future graphic novel or anything else.
Absolutely, man. I mean, let's be real. We're not going to stop anytime soon. Are we? In fact, we do have another. Our next project is a 200 and some odd page graphic novel, and it's completely finished. So
Okay.
there'll be more.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so the first question I usually start off with is tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into writing comic books and other things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm originally from Arizona. I moved out to Los Angeles, where I currently live, probably 6, 7 years ago. And I've been working in the new media and film industry since then. And I've written a bunch of stuff. I've written Star Trek comics. I did a 4-issue miniseries called Seven's Reckoning, the IDW published. And then I've self-published a bunch of comics like Action Hospital, which is a kind of action adventure story set in a futuristic hospital, as the name would imply. And probably about 6 or 7 other books. And I wrote a movie that's on Netflix called Alien Warfare. And I've been around, man. I've been out here making stuff, trying to make some cool art, and succeeding moderately, I suppose.
Okay. And is this like your, I guess for lack of better, is this your goal to do more of the graphic novels or do movies or a little bit of both or everything, or what's your
All
ultimate
the
goal?
above,
Okay.
baby. Yeah, no, I mean, I love comics. I love
Yeah.
comics. They're my first love, and they're the thing I'm primarily interested in. But I'm from kind of like a DIY punk background, so
Mm.
it was I like played in bands, and I've made like self-produced movies in high school and all that kind of stuff. That it never went anywhere because it's you and your friends running around in the desert and shit. Um,
Mhm.
but I actually struggled with that question that you just asked me quite a bit for a period of time, because there is a stereotype that people in comics blow up. They get a certain amount of notoriety, and then because the industry is so forgiving and there's so little money going around, unless you're working on Batman,
Mhm.
people leave to work on in other mediums. You become
Yeah.
a storyboard artist or a commercial director or whatever, and that's something I struggled with for a period of time, where I was very rigid, and I was like, I'm not going to do other things. I'm only going to make comics. And uh, I don't know. When you're a 16-year-old, it's really easy to draw lines in the sand,
Yeah.
because you don't have a full perspective, right? And
Right.
thankfully, the industry that I'm in, it has lots of time where you're not doing anything.
Right.
So when you're waiting for notes on a draft, you could just be making comics. It's not that
Right.
fucking hard.
And you asked before the show, when did I start the podcast? And I said 2018. And it's like before that, I never even thought about doing a podcast. Oh, that's what other people do and stuff like that. But I mentioned my friend Lee. He says, "But you interview people well," and blah blah blah. And I go, "Okay, fine, yeah." But then it's like what you're talking about. Should never turn down opportunities if they, excuse me, if they rise. And
Yeah, yeah. I'm a
so
big proponent of yes and. you know, the improvisation gold standard of like just say yes and see where it goes.
Right.
I really do believe that accepting those opportunities, even when they're kind of weird and just like I don't know if I'm interested in this, but just saying yes,
Hmm.
it takes you all kinds of interesting places. You get cool stories, maybe you'll make some money, and you know, there's something for just the experience. You know, you only live once.
Right.
You gotta go out and try and do some shit. You know.
Now, before we actually talk about the graphic novel or any other projects you've worked on, tell me a little bit about Nicole and her background.
Yeah, she was an editorial illustrator when we met. She went to school for illustration, as did I. We were both artists, obviously. And she and I met like 5 years ago or so. She was an artist that I had just kind of met through my network of friends at a gallery show, and I was like, "Hey, your stuff is really cool. Do you want to potentially make some mini comics with me, or work on this web comic that I'm doing, Action Hospital?" And initially, she was a little reticent, just because I think she was very interested in comics as a teenager and was really interested in manga, and like at one point in time was trying to like naively move to Japan to be a mangaka, which is just like so difficult. But you know, when you're 16, you don't know. You're just like,
Right.
fuck yeah, I'm gonna do this.
Hmm.
And she had kind of drifted away from comics for a little while, and was, like I said, working as an editorial illustrator and a toy designer. She was working at a company that Mattel owned, designing like, what are those things called? Like a fuzzy kind of color in posters, where it's like
Oh.
you buy a felt black felt poster and it comes with some markers, and you're a 9-year-old and you're like, oh yeah, this unicorn is gonna be purple or whatever. So she was working on those. She was designing those and doing editorial stuff on the side. And I was like, your work is amazing. You should make comics, because that's kind of my approach with everything. I think comic books are the ultimate artistic medium. I think they're criminally underappreciated in our culture, and I kind of just wish everyone would make comics. Even people I don't like. I'm just like, I wonder what kind of comics that person would make.
Yeah.
And we hit it off. We started making mini comics, and then from there started making shorter books, and then longer books, and then touring the country, and then eventually, we moved up to the point where, we've got this book that we're here to talk about today a little bit. Everyone is Tulip, coming out from Dark Horse, and we have a book coming out next year from Simon and Schuster, and we've made multiple graphic novels, and I don't know, it's pretty crazy. It's very rewarding, and it's cool to see her grow as an artist too. And she makes me a better writer and a better illustrator. She's very, very, very skilled. She's a very skilled illustrator, which is a compliment that I don't levy lightly.
Now, where did you meet her? Did you meet her in LA or somewhere else?
Yeah, in Los Angeles. Yeah,
Okay.
I was at a gallery show for Julian. Oh, Julian Barros. He's like an Instagram illustrator who does these
Okay.
kind of, I think that's his name. It's been a couple years since I've had to think about this.
Okay.
He does kind of like very illustrative spot illustrations of kind of like the theme that he was working on for that show was like this boy like interacting with a giant moon, and like the moon would kind of be fractured and the boy would be like floating through the moon and stuff, at a gallery in Culver City that I don't remember the name of. And basically she was there with a couple of my other friends that I knew through illustration circles, and I started talking with her, and she was funny, and then we went to a bar afterwards, and she started drawing on napkins as you do when you're an illustrator. And I was like, oh wow, this is great. And kind of from there we started up a friendship, and very soon after I was like, bro, you got to make some fucking comics.
Now, is she from LA or somewhere else?
Yes, she's from the suburbs of Los Angeles. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. All right. And then as far as, like when she was drawing on the napkins, I know this graphic novel has kind of a manga style. You said she's a fan. Is that the way she normally draws, or is she drawing various different styles?
She can she's a much better illustrator than I am. I can kind of only draw in one style. And she's much more elastic and can make choices about her art and choose to expand or retract certain things. I think it's definitely the style that our book is drawn in is in line with what she normally does, but
Okay.
there is a theme in the book where our main character has this duality to
Mm-hmm.
her, and in one version of her persona, she's drawn a little bit more like a shojo manga heroine. And in another version, she's drawn probably a little bit more of like a traditional American indie comics
Yeah.
person, which also fits into the theme of the book in an interesting way,
Right.
without
Now,
spoiling anything.
yeah, we can talk about your other projects you've collaborated on in more in depth later if we can, but it doesn't really
Yeah,
matter.
sure.
But were those done similarly to this one, or is this one kind of unique in all when you compare all the projects that you've worked on?
I would say that the process by which we've made books has changed a little bit over time,
Okay.
in that because she had stepped away from comics for a little while, when she came back to it, she might not have, because when you're reading comics as a kid, you're not necessarily cognizant of how they're made. Where I am an insane person and have always been obsessed with how things are made. Like even as a child, I was like, but how did James Whale do the shot in Invisible Man where he pulls the bandages off his head? How does this happen? Oh my God, it was black material. What? um I've always kind of been an old soul man at a time, whatever the euphemism is that you want to use.
Right.
And so I think initially when we started making comics, it was probably a little bit closer to like a traditional American compartmentalized. I wrote a script,
Okay.
then I gave it to her, then she illustrated it. But now it's very much a partnership. We
Mm.
co-create the stories together. She's involved in every aspect of the stories, contributes ideas for not only characters but theme, and we're both very interested in like the mechanics of comics. So there's a lot of kind of formal elements or narrative mechanics that happen in the book that are based exclusively around the inner workings of the comics medium, that some of which I came up with, some of which she came up with. So it's a true collaboration. Like the book really developed. I would do a draft and then we would talk about it, and then she would be like, yeah, this doesn't work, and that's great, and blah, 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 and then I would go and do another draft, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
Um,
So for this particular book, Everyone is Tulip, basically, I'll read the synopsis type rather than my
sure,
memory. A
sure,
young
yeah,
woman moves to LA to pursue a career as an actress, gets sucked into internet performance art. That's the description. So,
yeah,
um, I've kind of vaguely heard of internet performance art. I mean, obviously, there's people that make a living off of YouTube and blah, 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 blah.
yeah.
Um, whose idea was it? Was it both of yours or hers to use that as a springboard for an idea for a script to make a
Yeah,
book?
definitely. I think initially, she was. We're both interested in these types of people. There's a bunch of them. If you're familiar with this type of world, it's going to be pretty apparent who we're drawing inspirations from. Like, there was an internet performance art group called Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, which was very popular a couple years ago. There's another person called Poppy, another person called Dolvita. There's a TikToker right now called Bella Porch, and another woman called Belle Delphine. And they're varying degrees of political performance art
Mm-hmm.
combined with a bizarre or otherworldly visual aesthetic. Usually is the kind of signifier, and it's a subculture that we were both very interested in. And Nicole, I think, originally started drawing some of these people just because they were so interesting to her. And based on the drawings, I was like, oh, this is really cool. I wonder if there's a book here. And then kind of over the course of talking and discussing it, it was like, oh no, there is a book, and this is how we would do it.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of was organic, but also it kind of started with her. She was the
Okay.
one who really got interested in the aesthetics of these people, and then um, it kind of naturally developed over the course of a couple months, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, where did the title come from? Everyone is Tulip.
Yeah,
I
I
know it's a
mean,
repeating phrase throughout the book, but it doesn't really explain that too well.
yeah, yeah. There's well, one, I think there are multiple meanings for
Mhm.
the title, which I'm a little reticent to necessarily say
Don't
just because
spoil it too much, but I mean, you know what
yeah,
I mean. It's like,
yeah. Yeah, there's some of these people in this space did things like that, and I was
okay,
like,
I guess
oh,
that's what I'm driving at. Yeah.
yes, it's definitely it's inspired by real people, full on. Yeah, like there this kind of recurring motif, especially with digital content, because it disappears so quickly because it's kind of fed to people through an algorithmic distribution system and then vanishes immediately, and it's so disposable. You have to kind of brand yourself so people end up saying the same thing and using the same mottos and doing the same shit over and over and over and over and over and over again. Like I, I follow on TikTok. I follow the guy who's the creator of Billions, and I can't even remember his name right now, but I can tell you how he opens every goddamn TikTok, and it's, "Hi, I'm Mark so and so, co-creator, showrunner of Billions," and then he'll launch into whatever the little thought that he's making is about the industry or creativity or whatever.
Mhm.
And that's because it's not like people are being served this content chronologically. There's no context to art anymore.
Right.
Everything is this free floating single piece of information, and you have to structure your kind of thesis statement with a beginning, middle, and an end now, which in a 15-second TikTok is a weird time to be alive, man. It's weird.
Or Snapchat or any of those type of
Mm-hmm.
different things. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
completely.
Now, is this story autobiographical at all for you or her, or you've had any experiences that translated, maybe not specifically to this character, but just various scenes throughout the book?
I would say that, one of the things that we've been doing kind of some press for the book, right? Doing various interviews and doing podcasts and stuff, trying to get the word out about the book because it is an independent comic. I mean, it is published by Dark Horse, but most of their resources are going to fucking Hellboy. They're not going to us. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. It's no hard feeling. It's just the reality of the situation. Like, Jeff Lemire pulls more money than old Dirty Davy Bakes. I got it. So I've been doing all of these interviews, and a lot of times people don't know me, which why would they? I'm not a well-known personality or anything.
Mhm.
And the question of autobiography comes up a lot, but it usually pertains specifically to the fact that the character in the book, Becca Harper, is originally from Arizona, and I'm
Mhm.
originally from Arizona.
Yeah.
And I would say that no and yes. So the fact Becca's from Arizona is not autobiographical. That's mostly there just
Yeah.
so I don't have to fucking research shit. I know how to write about not liking Arizona. That's kind
Right.
of it.
I guess what I'm talking about is, I mean, it's like everybody kind of does this, even if they don't. So is like the dialogue throughout the book, except for when she's saying everyone is Tulip, you know,
Yeah,
is
totally.
kind of natural. It seems natural in most cases, like
Mm-hmm.
a conversation two people or more would actually have. It
Yeah,
doesn't
definitely.
seem stilted or made up, or this
Yeah,
person is saying this.
right.
So was that in autobiographical? What I mean is this actual snippets of dialogue that you or Nicole actually said and said, "Hey, let's put that in the book." It's something that happened to
Right.
me with a friend some other way, but this is a good thing that could be a scene in our book.
I think
Yeah,
I think yes, there definitely is that type of
yeah.
stuff specifically about the kind of the general milieu of living in Los Angeles, the kind of like background radiation of just like shitty douchiness is definitely
Yeah.
something that if it wasn't taken word for word, it is very heavily influenced by either meetings that
Okay.
we've been in or people we've been around in coffee shops or that kind of thing. Like and I know in the book it is intended to be like, look at these douchey people, but I really love that. Like, I really love, I'm from a fucking shitty small town where nobody's trying to do anything except do drugs and maybe go into the military. And I love that in LA, everybody's trying, everybody's reaching for the stars. Will they make it? No, probably not. But I love the ambition of this place, and I
Right.
love the they're striving to achieve. And I think also, just to drill down deeper into what you're asking, I think the autobiography is in the book, but it is more baked into the structure or the characters or the theme, in that comics is a really weird industry. So is Hollywood. Hollywood's an equally weird industry, just completely cruel in a different and singular way. But that kind of cruelty and antipathy towards creators is something that I've had to reckon with, right? You know, it's nobody's out here trying to make friends. Everybody's trying to make money. And the fulcrum of artistic integrity versus commercial viability is something that I find myself grappling with constantly, whether I want to or not. And in comics, it manifests in taking a bad deal, giving up ownership of the property, working with a publisher that you might not believe in all of their practices in order to try and get to the next level. In Hollywood, it's like, oh no, we're literally going to give you a dime, and then you're going to make this thing for us, and then we're probably going to take your name off it anyway.
Right.
And so, you know, those experiences, they're not enriching to the soul, you know. They definitely are. They seep the energy from you over time, and it's a real struggle to attempt to remain as a well-rounded, centered person and not allow that to affect who you are, because you have those experiences and you want to learn from them and say, oh, I'm not going to do this time. I'm going to zig when I last time zagged. And then that fundamentally changes who you are as an artist, because you're not making choices because of what's right for the project. You're making choices to avoid pain behind the scenes, right?
Right.
And that fulcrum, the struggle of how far would you go to get what you want, is really the thematic core of the book. It's, you know, our book follows Becca and a couple ensemble characters as they're constantly in this tug of war between those two ideals. And it is not something that any of them have the answer to. It's not a preachy, like, well, you gotta always say no unless it's a great deal. Like, it's not, that's not the world we live in, right? And so that friction narratively is what is, I would say, is a deeply autobiographical thing. I understand that very well. Am I a Black single mother who lives in South LA and works at a check cashing place called Gimme Dem Dollars? No. But I know the struggle of trying to take care of the people I love and still express myself through my art.
Right. And I was going to say, you know, and that leads into it saying, give me dim dollars. I was going to say a few things that I like about the graphic novel, and then you can kind of elaborate as I mention one. I'll jump to that one since obviously it's a take on like any check cashing place or anything like that. But what kind of inspired that? I really thought that was very humorous. There's a few other things I'll mention too. So
yeah. There's a bunch of like these weird, you know, Nicole and I have worked on a bunch of projects together. So there's all these weird little inside jokes and like universe building almost. So like there's a fictional fast food chain that goes through all of our, so there's, in all of our books, there's a fictional fast food chain called Shiver Me Burgers, which is kind of like a Long John Silver's.
It's the same one in all of them? Okay.
Yeah, it's always there. Yeah. It's basically like in our little pocket dimension, the dominant fast food chain in California is this weird, shitty, pirate themed fast food place for some reason. I don't know why, but we both have just really latched onto it. It's a major location in our next book. It's been in a bunch. Yeah, it's been in a bunch of them. So
I think that's very funny. So
thank you. I think it's very funny too. I appreciate you liking it, because no one ever points it out. But yeah, the Shiver Me Burgers and Gimme Dem Dollars are these two fake brands that are in both of our book, or a lot of our books, and specifically Gimme Dem Dollars comes from I dated a girl at the end of high school who worked at like a check cashing place like that, and she was a doll. She was super, super nice, but it was this thing where just in the back of your head you're like, yeah, but these places take advantage of people. Why are you working here? And it was this really strange kind of like, you know, you could get another job. It wasn't like in the book, where in the book our character Chloe works there, and it is very apparent that like she doesn't have a choice. She needs to take whatever the job she can get is in order to pay bills. That was not this specific individual's thing. And it was that idea of kind of a business that everybody acknowledges exists, and also everybody's kind of like, something's not right here, is a very intriguing idea to me.
Mhm.
And Shiver Me Burgers, that I think that just came from Nicole. I think we were joking about like what would be the dumbest name for a pirate themed burger restaurant,
Yeah,
and she was like Shiver Me Burgers,
yeah.
because I think I had come up with some sort of pun that was like burgars or
Burger.
something, and she was like, nah, that doesn't work,
Yeah.
and then she said Shiver Me Burgers. We were actually at a convention. We were at a convention selling comics, and she said Shiver Me Burgers. Somebody walked by, and I was like, hey, would you shop at a fast food place called Shiver Me Burgers? And they were like, is it pirate themed? And I was like, yes. They were like, fuck yeah. And I was like, all right, that's the title of the place now.
I thought it was kind of maybe possibly inspired by maybe like Burger King, because you think of him as like he's a king, so obviously he must have a kingdom somewhere, and so that just kind of morphed from kings
His,
and everything to
yeah,
pirates and stuff like that.
man, the Burger King's kingdom,
Yeah.
it's flavor.
One other thing I like, and I was just also curious about the inspiration. I will say where I think it's inspired from is like I like the close-ups of the cell phones. I'll use my cell phone as an
Yeah.
example. I don't, it's like
Yeah.
and it has what dialogue is going on in her life and everything like that. And it kind of inspired me, or not inspired, it reminded me of the old Batman the Dark Knight novel from way back when, where they
Yeah.
had like all the images of the TV sets and
Totally.
everything like that. Was that like an inspiration for you for that, or is it just
So like I had said previously, Nicole and I are both really interested and obsessed with the language of comics and the medium of comics, and kind of pushing things in new directions, and finding vistas that have previously been undiscovered, right? And I think that's more possible in comics than other mediums, because in the 1950s, comics was the dominant medium in North America, and then there was a Senate hearing called the Kefauver hearings, where they arraigned a bunch of they got all these people together, and they were like, hey, we think that comics are corrupting America's youth. And they had this man named Frederick Wortham, who was a pop psychologist of the day, come and basically deliver testimony saying, I've interviewed a bunch of kids at this clinic I work at. They all say they love comics, and they're all committing crimes. Therefore, comics must be causing these crimes. And that caused mass comic book burnings across the country, a censorship board being enacted, and comics almost overnight going from being the dominant form of American culture to a ghettoized pornography peddling industry, ostensibly.
yeah.
And it's in North America, it's never really recovered, which is really, it's a crime. Like, to me, it's artistic. It's an artistic travesty. And so there's so much untapped about the medium of comics. I mean, think about it this way, right? Movies have been around for 100 years.
Right.
And it took us till 1999 for somebody to be like, but what if we moved the camera and had slow motion at the same time in The Matrix? You know what I mean? Like, that seems like such a simple thing to think of, but it took the Wachowski sisters to almost reinvent the visual language of cinema in one shot. It's astounding. And I think advances and inventions like that, new creations, can be made in comics more so than anywhere else, because there's so much untapped potential. And that's why the medium is so exciting and visceral to me. And what you're talking about, these cell phone mechanics, it comes from a pretty purely mechanical place, where I was thinking about how I was frustrated with the dimensions of a comic book. A traditional North American comic book is 6.67 by 10.35, basically. And the reason that it is a skinny, tall book is because in the fucking 1930s, the guy who decided to invent comics took a newspaper broadsheet, folded it over, and then folded it over again. That's the only reason. Yeah, that's the only reason. MC Gaines, the father of Bill Gaines, the guy who started EC Comics, Charlie Gaines started EC Comics, but Bill Gaines made EC Comics what it was.
Right.
He folded it over twice and was just like, okay, this is the palette that every artist will work on for the next 100 years, which is so bizarre to me. It's so bizarre. But I was frustrated with that. And I was, because humans are binocular characters. We like horizontal or binocular creatures. We're predators, so we have eyes in the front of our heads, and we like horizontal compositions, so we're constantly interpreting the world in this horizontal bar. And it's very difficult to put a horizontal bar into that shape of a vertical bar, which means you have to make multiple compositions or make it a 2-page spread, because that kind of mimics the way our eyes work a little bit better. And I was thinking about the 9-panel grid and how the density associated with a 9-panel grid is really great for narrative storytelling, but very difficult for compositions. And then it occurred to me, a phone is kind of the same shape as a horizontal 9-panel grid panel. We could make a pattern of narrative panel, cell phone panel, narrative panel, so on and so forth. And we could make shapes in the page itself, because as a comic book creator, I'm always thinking of like the composition of the individual panel, the composition of the page, and the composition of 2 pages at the same time. And the cell phone mechanic that we're talking about right now works really well for, you can have themes expressed very easily visually because it's easily replicable. You can have the cell phones make a diamond, they can make a square, they can be making a diamond, except there's the right hand page, there's no bottom for the diamond, and it's like, oh, the composition is uneven. What does that say about the story? And like there's all these kind of mechanical ways of using them that, to my knowledge, I mean, yeah, cell phones have been in comics before. I'm not claiming credit for that, but to my knowledge, cell phones in comics have not been done in that specific way.
I personally haven't seen it. I'll admit I haven't read everything, but I mean, I read
I
quite a bit of different
haven't
things.
read every comic ever created either,
yeah.
but I feel like I'm pretty in touch, especially in
But-
North America. I'm pretty in touch with what's happening, and
Yeah.
I don't believe that it has been done prior.
Okay. Now, you ended up with this. Well, let me ask this first. So I read it digitally because that's how you sent me a copy. Is the dimensions of this book the same as a standard comic book, or is it
Yes,
a little
yeah,
bit?
it
Okay, I
is
just want to make
6
sure, because
yeah,
when I'm reading digitally and just scrolling up, I don't know
yeah,
exactly
it
what
doesn't
size
have,
it is.
yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay. So my question was, how did you end up with Dark Horse? Did they see any sample pages and say, we got to have this, or did you shop it around? What was going on?
It was a little bit of both, honestly. We had been talking to some other publishers, went back and forth. We were talking, and then we met Connor Knudsen, the editor that ultimately acquired it, at a convention in Seattle, I think. I think it was Seattle, either Seattle or Chicago. I don't remember.
When was this? Because obviously we've had COVID for a while. So
yeah, let's say it was 2 years ago, I think.
Okay.
And he came to our table and was like, "Hey, I read your book, Fuck Off Squad, and I really liked it. Do you have anything else like this?" And we were like, "Well, yes and no. We have another book. It's not exactly like Fuck Off Squad, but it has a very kind of similar theme or feel to it. Maybe you would like it." And so we sent it to him. He was a massive champion for it. Like, I can't thank my lucky stars enough, man. That guy really went to bat for the book, because not only is it a little bit of an unconventional thing, but it also, Dark Horse, I don't think Dark Horse is necessarily known for publishing work like this. And I think it's cool and a good thing that this ended up there. I'm very excited about the potential of it, because thanks to their many successful adaptations and their track record as a stalwart publisher in the industry, they've really carved out a name for themselves. And I'm very excited to see how our book does. I am a dyed-in-the-wool self-publisher. Regardless of having written Star Trek, I view myself as somebody who is an independent comics creator.
Yeah.
And for there to be a mechanism that I will not have to call every fucking comic book store myself, is like, oh,
Mhm.
this is cool. I'm excited to see where this all goes.
Yeah. Did they have, I know I've worked with Dark Horse too, but it was only for more reprint titles, Harvey companions and things like that through with Jerry Beck and Leslie Cabarger. That was a few years ago. And I was working with Mike Richardson more than
Mm.
who you were working with. But did you find it
The big
pretty?
he doesn't like it when people call him Mike Richardson. He only answers to the big cheese.
Oh, well.
That's not true. I don't know Mike Richardson at all.
Oh,
I
okay.
was that was
Okay.
completely a joke. I don't know him at all.
Okay.
He seems like
Big
a lovely guy.
Big
He
red
seems like a
cheese. No.
yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
well, now I lost my question. So how was it working for them? I mean, was it freeing? Like, oh, I don't have to have all this responsibility of, like you're saying, marketing and everything like that, or are they pretty restrictive? I mean, it was pretty good for what I was doing, but that wasn't a graphic novel like you're doing. That was
Yeah.
a reprint title. So,
Yeah,
talk me through.
yeah, the process bringing them so far has been really good. The the creative side of it, we had been making Tulip for a period of time, so it wasn't necessarily like, large amounts of editorial feedback. It was more just kind of like Connor looking over the pages and being like, "Oh yeah, this all works,"
Oh,
or
good.
on the very rare occasion being like, "Guys, we can't put that amount of nudity in," or whatever it was, like.
Yeah.
But it was very very minimal in terms of that. But there was a lot of
Mhm.
support in terms of him helping us find people to help with production and do design on the book. Nicole still ended up co-designing the book because
Mhm.
she has a kind of a keen artistic vision, but Dark Horse is very very hospitable in that regards.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of the marketing stuff, they've been very helpful, but it still is, as I was joking earlier,
Mhm.
everyone's Tulip ain't fucking Hellboy, so it's still a lot of me kind of going out and being
Yeah.
like, hey guys, hey guys, hey guys. But so much of that legwork is elective as opposed to a necessity
Yeah.
because they just have a large apparatus and retailers are aware of the books they put out.
Yeah. I mean, it's not too graphic. It seems to me like a PG-13. I mean, unless you're really
Totally.
worried about nipple, which is in
Yeah.
a couple shots. But was there, was the original idea more graphic than what you came out, or is pretty much what Dark Horse was
It really
coming out?
is.
Okay,
It
all right.
really is
Just kind of
this.
curious. Yeah.
I mean, when we first started, even before Dark Horse was involved, when we first started discussing it, we were debating making the book a little bit more like the Satoshi Kon anime Perfect Blue,
Mm,
or Millennium Actress, where
hmm.
it is kind of more of this dream logic. Like we thought maybe it would be a little bit more genre-y. It's kind of a intellectual thriller where maybe the digital persona would come to life and maybe our character would interact with it. It would kind of be like a Tyler Durden-esque reflection of who they are, maybe. And then ultimately that just, we weren't as interested in that direction. So we ended up making this book, which is a much more kind of emotionally grounded story about real people in an artistic dilemma, as opposed to the Tony Scott version of it.
And the main theme of it, like we've talked about already, is that it's about internet performance art. Talk about that a little bit because I'm not terribly familiar with it, just a little bit. I mean, this kind
Mhm.
of shed new light on things. Sounds like there's a kind of a seamier underside to this, as there is with every other industry. I'll admit, it's not like it's immune to this, but or unique to this, I should say. So what are the realities about internet performance art that you know of that
Yeah, sure.
are out there?
Yeah, I mean, like I had said, when we started this project, there was a small cadre of people who were really doing this very seriously and gaining a lot of attention.
Mhm.
And they have all now kind of used these videos as springboards to other things because that's where the money is. Like, there's a very famous TikToker named Bella Porch who
Mhm.
started using TikTok as just kind of like she would like lip sync to songs with this filter that moved the camera to her face. So it's this very bizarre kind of rhythmic thing. And
Mhm.
she has 64 million followers now. And when you have 64 million followers, Hollywood comes a knocking, the music industry comes a knocking, and now she's a pop star.
We need
You
that
know,
here at the Fun Ideas podcast anyway.
yeah, you and me both, man. I'm trying to get 64 million. Actually, I don't even know if I want that many, because 64 million followers comes with baggage that neither of us can even possibly
Mhm.
comprehend.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, many of them have moved into other things, right? You know, I mean, look
Mhm.
at Logan Paul. You know,
Mhm.
he's now boxing Floyd Mayweather and got paid like $10 million to do it. How weird is that? So
Mhm.
I think you know, the straightforward answer that for, you know, of internet, what is internet performance art, how does it factored into our culture, is that like the people who started doing that stuff are kind of honestly more mainstream culture than we probably think they are.
Yeah.
And honestly, in this day and age, everyone is a brand. The internet has flattened everything, so everything is internet performance art. You
Yeah.
know, I'm reticent to expand on that too much, but you might think that the title "Everyone is Tulip" could maybe be related to that theme in some way.
Mhm.
You know, and it's a very strange time to be alive, where we have this mechanism in our culture that flattens our individualistic lived experiences into ones and zeros that are meant to commodify us and sell myths about ourselves. It's a very
Mhm.
strange time.
Mm. Now, in saying that, obviously you have this graphic novel. It could easily lend itself, at least I think so, to either an animated or a live action feature film.
Mhm.
Is that a possibility? Is that something that would cross your mind, or it's like, oh no, 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 this is only for this graphic novel and we're done?
I mean, look, man, if you're J.J. Abrams and you want to come have a conversation, my door is open. I think the key distinction for me is that the book is designed to be a book. It's
Mhm.
designed to take advantage of the comics medium. I think it's pretty apparent from this conversation that I am somebody who cares deeply about the history of comics and about the future of comics, and wants to play a small part in both of those things. I do not think that there is a solid track record with people in comics being treated well.
Mhm.
And that's unfortunate. And I think because of that, there's an entire generation of would be intellectual property farmers who make comics to do exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
There are multiple publishers whose whole modus operandi is just churn out a bunch of shitty comics that aren't going to advance the medium and aren't going to pay people well as lottery tickets to Hollywood.
Right.
Uh, More power to them. I hope their house is burned down.
Yeah.
So
Um,
that I guess that would be the point, is just like, yes, I would love for something that we make to potentially be adapted, or to adapt it myself. That'd be really fun, but that would be a separate and distinct adventure
yeah.
from this.
So that wasn't an ultimate goal of it. I mean, it didn't sound like it, but if it happened,
Yeah, if it happened, it'd
I'll
be
listen.
great.
Yeah,
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 totally. And
yeah,
obviously, I'm pursuing avenues that are very diverse, and sometimes they overlap.
yeah.
But yeah, I never go into a comics project with the idea of like, I'm gonna take this shitty pilot I wrote that nobody
Right.
wants to read, and turn it into a comic to try and get somebody to read it. Like,
Yeah.
that's not who I am.
Now, did Dark Horse? I think you already said this, but I'll ask anyway. Did Dark Horse say anything about that? Because they have projects that obviously have turned into things like Mask and
Yeah,
Hellboy and
totally.
stuff like that. So.
So uh my understanding is that Dark Horse has like a different multi-tiered deals that they make with people. Some of their deals, they co-own the film rights, or they have a stake in the film rights with the creators as a
Hmm.
means of trying to leverage it to Hollywood.
Hmm.
Our deal is not that. I own, or Nicole and I own, Everyone is Tulip 100%.
Hmm.
Um, could there be a discussion with Dark Horse at some point in the future? Possibly. You
Hmm.
never know, man. If they come to me and they're like, Netflix wants to do it tomorrow, like, okay, let's talk. Let's see what that
Yeah,
means.
yeah. Hmm.
But right now, Nicole and I own it 100%.
Very cool. Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned it a couple times, and now I'm curious because I've only read this project from you. I mean, I'm aware of Star Trek. I'm aware of Batgirl and things
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
totally.
But she did Shadow of the Batgirl. I think. Did you work on that as
Yeah,
well?
I
Okay.
did not know.
Oh, okay.
No.
So that's her project. Okay.
Yeah.
And I would
Mhm.
have asked her about it if she was here, but that's okay. But you mentioned Fuck Off Squad a couple times. So explain that and
Yeah,
explain
yeah.
some of your other projects you worked on as well, because, for me, okay, I liked what I read. I'm curious about other stuff you've done. So,
Sure, yeah.
mention a few of the projects you've worked on or even
Yeah.
solo. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So Fuck Off Squad is a coming of age queer romance comic about skater kids in Los Angeles. It's a kind of slice of life drama about trying to live as a 20 something teen, late teen, early 20 something in LA. And it follows three kind of uh, would be miscreant punk kids in the LA scene. And so it's very kind of slice of lifey, drama. If you like things like Master of None or Girls, the TV show Girls by Lena
Mhm.
Dunham, or that kind of stuff where it's like relationship drama, but also kind of funny.
Mhm.
That's what that book is about. And like I said, I wrote it and Nicole drew it, and Silver Sprocket put it out.
Okay.
And then the I have a book coming out right now. In fact, today, the day of this recording, issue 4 of my book Night Hunters, which is
Mhm.
a post-apocalyptic cyberpunk comic drawn by Alexis Zirrit and published by Floating World. It comes out in comic stores everywhere, and it's a kind of a bleak future where in Venezuela, there's been a law that's been enacted where if you want to run for public office, uh, rent an apartment, or have a child in a hospital, you have to have been or currently be a police officer.
Hmm.
So society like kind of makes it gets stratified almost overnight, where there's kind of like police officers and ex-police officers, and then like the dregs of society. And so it's kind of like a cyborg uh, Judge Dredd, Pat Mills esque kind of satire action comic. Um, and then the book that I'm probably most known for drawing is called Action Hospital, which I briefly mentioned earlier. It's a 3-volume, 300-page each trilogy where it takes place in this place called the Action Hospital, which is kind of a place you go to if you have otherworldly needs. Like if your brain is producing bacteria that's turning your body gold, then you go to the Action Hospital and you get surgery from like a satanic super surgeon who cures you with black magic. So
Mhm.
it's this kind of like larger than life kind of Silver Age comics version of a hospital. And I wrote all 3 volumes and co-drew it because there's a kind of conceit with the books where whenever the characters show up, they're always drawn by the same person.
Hmm.
So sometimes there's like 10 people all drawing on the same page.
Hmm. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like a jam or something like that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
okay, I
totally.
got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
It's a little bit more orchestrated, but yes, it
Yeah.
was definitely really there was that attitude where I would just like invite people to my house, be like, I'll buy you pizza, come fucking work on these pages, god damn it.
Um, couple ones I wrote down. I think it was in your little bio you sent me. Mary Tyler Moorhawk. What is that one?
Yeah, that's the book I just finished lettering that book. It's a 200-page graphic novel that's a kind of pulp adventure throwback book about a family of globe-trotting super scientist archaeologists who are forced to combat the ultimate evil and attempt to reconcile their interpersonal problems while also trying to save the world.
Hmm.
So it's this kind of almost like a postmodern self-aware version of Johnny Quest,
Hmm.
science fiction Indiana Jones maybe, and that one does not currently have a publisher, but
Oh,
I
okay. I was
just
gonna say who published
it
that one. Okay.
yeah it
Okay.
doesn't have a publisher yet, but I just finished lettering it like a day and a half ago, so I'm in that like yeah
Okay. So
got
you're
it.
you're like me. I on some of my books, I'm writing some books that don't have a publisher yet, but I figured they will.
Yeah,
So it's
totally.
just banking on it on that, saying somebody will like this somewhere, you know.
And you know what? Worst case scenario, if nobody likes it, I like it. So I'm gonna do a fucking Kickstarter and put that shit out myself.
Right. Another one, a Teenage Switchblade. Is that correct? Did you
Yeah,
mention that one? Okay, okay,
Teenage Switchblade was one of the that's uh, basically we published Fuck Off Squad as 3 individual mini graphic novels
okay.
because making comics fucking sucks and it takes forever, so you try and serialize things sometimes.
Yeah.
So the first one was called Fuck Off Squad, the second one's Teenage Switchblade, and the third one is Fever Coast, and we
Okay.
self serialized
Got
it
it.
and then collected it into one big volume that Silver Sprocket put out.
Okay, got it. I just wrote all these titles and I don't remember what I wrote about. And then I think
Yeah.
Suicide Forest is another
Yeah,
title. Okay.
Suicide Forest is an OGN that Nicole and I made where it all takes place in one room. And so as you turn the pages, the people move around within the room, stuff happens. It's almost kind of like, I guess maybe the equivalent would be like if you set up a camera in a room and then just filmed for like an hour and people moving around, having conversations, doing stuff. And so the book takes place over one night where a home invasion happens. So it's a horror comic that's all in this one room. It's almost like a one-act play.
So this is like your Matrix, right? Because you're talking about that camera angles,
yeah, totally.
technique, So okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. That's pretty much all the questions I had. It's like, did you have anything else to say about Everyone is Tulip or any other projects that you
Yeah, I mean,
have worked on, currently working on, going to work on?
I think the only thing I would say is that, sometimes when I start talking about Tulip or any of these books, it's a very kind of coldly analytical, serious tone.
Yeah.
And I just want to make it clear that Tulip is really funny, and
Yeah.
it has a heart to it, and it's not as check out the big brain on Brad as I am sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think that if you're someone with a cell phone, there's definitely something in Tulip that you will relate to. Because it's a very weird time to be alive.
Yes. And I did find it very entertaining, and so that's why, I was
Thank
like,
you.
oh, good. I'm glad it's not a graphic novel that's kind of an embarrassment. I have to interview this guy for an hour.
Yeah, no, totally.
Is it out now, or when is it out?
It comes out in comic book stores on the 16th of June, and it comes out in bookstores July 7th.
Okay. So this will probably air around the end of June, so it'll probably be out in your comic store by the time
Sounds great.
And then look for it in the bookstores. So
yeah,
I guess just this is your moment now. Give plugs for yourself, give plugs for websites, and anything else you'd like to say. And if you're going to make any convention appearances, since conventions are slowly opening back up.
Yeah, you can find me online at heydavebaker.com, or you can read, we're self-serializing Tulip online at everyoneistulip.com. So if you want to get a sample size of what the book looks like, it's being serialized there 3 pages a week. And the whole book is going to go up. It's not like we're just putting up a couple pages, but right now it's in, I think, the mid 50s or mid 40s in page count. So there's a sizable chunk to see if it looks like something you're into. If you want to watch little dumb videos of me on the internet, you can do so on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at xdavebakerx. And if you like deep dive explainer podcasts, you got to like some podcasts because you're listening to Mark's. So you got to like some kind of podcast. I too, like every human on earth, have a podcast.
No.
I know, right? It's called Deep Cuts, and it's a explainer podcast that I host with my friend Andrew Price. And the high concept of the show is that every week we pick a topic and then walk the listener through the ins, the outs, and the nitty gritty, so that they can appear like an interesting and idiosyncratic person at their next forced social function. And I think it's pretty cool. We did we get pretty crazy. It's very in depth. We did a whole episode about the file sharing service Napster, and we did it as a 2-hour musical with 11 original songs, and Andrew and I both sang. And yeah, it's pretty weird. We did an episode that I was telling Mark about before we started the show of Buckaroo Banzai retrospective, where we got the original screenwriter and director to come and create like a narrative radio play sequence at the end of the episode with a couple of the actors from the movie. So if you like weird, obscure stuff, or you want to learn about some cool stuff, Deep Cuts, find it wherever you get your podcasts.
Very cool. And I know Nicole's not here today, but do you have anything that she might be wanting to promote at this time?
I think Nicole would say, please go buy Everyone is Tulip. Please go buy Everyone is Tulip. Please go buy Everyone is Tulip. Nicole's nakedly commercial. She's a capitalist through and through.
And this is her baby right now, so she wants to
Yes.
nurture it and watch it grow. So okay,
100%.
fair enough. All right. Well, I want to thank you, Dave, for being on the show today. It was a pleasure talking to you. I really enjoyed Everyone is Tulip, and when it comes out, I should buy it in print form because I only have the digital form. It's from Dark Horse, and like you said, it'll be in bookstores and comic book stores very soon. And thank you for being on Fun Ideas Podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. This was great.
All right. We'll talk soon. Okay.